All right, welcome everybody. We're really excited about tonight because we are talking with a brand new literary magazine called Exposed Brick. Their first issue just came out. Here it is. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous and glossy. And we're so happy to be doing this because to us, this is showcasing artists and writers who haven't been heard often enough. And I love the magazine because of that. And I'm really glad that the gallery is getting behind this because we want to hear your voices, and it's just really important. So tonight I'm going to talk to the two of the founding magazine editors, Millie Joseph and Gladys Guitao Damascos. And then Millie is going to take it over and she's going to lead us in the whole program, which is really lovely. Each artist will read, and then Millie has some questions that she's going to talk to us all about. So I want to welcome Roberta DeLillo, wave if you're here, Ryko Amoa, Dariana Guerrero, and Yanaris Collado, who isn't quite here yet, but will. So the Peg Center for Art and Activism offers all of these events free of charge, but I've been educated and things are changing. Millie and I spent a long time going over how we were going to work with this and collaborate together. And we have paid the artists tonight a stipend, and we're going to start doing that now. Again, it's to amplify the voices that we don't hear enough of, and to actually help these artists know that through our support, they can actually start to see themselves as making art a career in their lives. So to that end, we ask that people who want to donate to us, and Julie's going to put our website up in the chat box. It's a PayPal account that's very easy to donate to, and to support Exposed Brick, go to their website, which is julieexposedbrickliterarymagazine.com, and buy yourself a magazine and make a donation. It's a beautiful, beautiful magazine. So first, me and Millie and Gladys are going to talk, which I'm excited about. And I've got a bunch of questions, and I'm just going to, not race through them, but we're going to talk together. So Millie and Gladys, welcome, and you can unmute yourself so we can talk. So for me, I really want to know, hi Millie, hi Gladys. I want to know, like, what started this fire under you guys, and like when did it start, the idea in you, but really what's lighting your fire to do this, because it's a big leap of faith to start a literary magazine in this climate. So talk to us.
Millie, do you want to go first, or should I?
Yeah, so actually this started off kind of like a joke, and then it became actually like really serious, because we were doing like writing club, and we were meeting up, and we were like writing pieces, and we were meeting up with other artists, and then we were kind of thinking, how do we get like our art like out there, or how do we get other people exposed to some of the beautiful things that we're seeing? And it was like, well, we should just have our own magazine and just do it ourselves. And it started just as that, and then as people bought into the vision and started submitting, it became about like elevating artists and making a community where people felt safe and able to put their work out there and grow, along with us.
Did you know each other? Did you know each other before you started the magazine?
That's a great question.
Yeah, actually, so all of us, Eben, who's also our co-founder, who's not here right now, she's in South Africa. We actually have known each other since high school, so we've known each other a pretty long time. So that was, amazing, because it's always fun to work with your friends because you already know how you guys work together, and you guys get to grow together, and you already kind of know the love that you have for each other. So that was something that worked out amazing for us. And, Gladys, I don't know if you want to add on to that.
That's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
So do you know, I'm working on this word instigate a lot. Like, what do you want Exposed Brick to instigate? Like, what's the sort of thrust of the magazine? Not theme so much, but your intention.
I can take that. So I know for me, I've always been a writer, and I have just always, I love reading and writing. I love school. I'm sort of a nerd in that way. And I know that like our reputation in the city of Lawrence is not that. Like I feel like all I really do in the city is make art, and read and write. Like I see a lot of the literary side of the city, and that's like not at all really the reputation that we have at all. And I see that a lot as a teacher too. I just see that when people assume that our students don't have interest in literary arts. And I think for me, the magazine was a lot of like, okay, well, this is something that we can just give to people as like, this is the art and literature side of the city. And I know so many of us have been creating forever, like Roberta and Dariana and Yaneris, like, have been writing with them for years, decades even at this point.
Mhm.
And it's just so weird to me that people don't see that side of the city. So for us, it's just sort of like a place to keep, like an archive of like all our writing, pretty much. So.
Like amplifying the voices that people don't expect to hear or haven't yet heard.
Right.
So nowhere in the magazine, at least in the masthead part of it, does it say that you're a BIPOC magazine, but do you consider yourself a BIPOC magazine?
Yeah, I would say so. I think we are very intentional in amplifying voices of, people of color, Black, Indigenous folks, queer folks, especially now when I think a lot of people from that community need a place to express themselves, and just, think through ideas and network with each other. And then on top of that, just to support them, put money in their hands, give them, a publishing credit or, a place where they can say my work is published. I think that work is really important right now. But our network is, it's vast. We have a lot of supporters who are, not BIPOC, and we have a lot of networks that we're part of that might not necessarily be BIPOC organizations, but they're very supportive of our mission, and we're very grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, Karen Risteban said she couldn't make it tonight, but she really wanted to hear the recording because I think CCI was one of your funders, which sort of leads me to like, this is a hefty magazine that costs no small penny to produce. So was it hard to get, like, I know that you published or printed 100 copies the first time. Are you planning on keeping the run the same as you go? And how did you get the money together? How did you get funding?
Millie, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so we actually made 50 copies the first run around. So we did a really small batch, but what we originally actually started off doing, so this was actually due to COVID that we were able to be really smart about kind of fundraising. In the beginning, we didn't have any money. We started like with $0. Literally, we were doing everything off of free platforms, free services. And we saw that people actually wanted the product that we had. So we were selling digital copies, which was a shift from what we wanted to do because we wanted to start off with print and really mainly make print our focus. But we were able to sell digital copies, which in turn was able to give us funding to actually print the
That's smart.
batch of physical copies. And with that, we were able to prove like we can, have a profitable product. We were able to then apply for funding because then it's a lot easier for people to believe in you and give you money when you have a product that you have been able to kind of establish on your own without a lot of resources. And with that, we were able to apply for grants to help elevate, getting a better product, having more issues printing out, and also connecting with more artists.
So do you have is it going to be a quarterly? I know the next issue is about to go to the printer, right? Is that true? And what's the title of the second issue?
So our theme for issue 2 is Boundless Land. And yes, so our second issue is slotted to get printed at the end of the month. So that is something to keep your eye out on if you did enjoy issue 1, that we do have issue 2 that's coming soon, which is really exciting. And we are planning to do quarterly. We want to do 3 magazines a year. So we're on our second. So we have one more this round to go to kind of square out like our year, and that's our plan for now.
You know, it was really a pleasure sort of getting to know you, Millie, with our meetings about this event and creating the title together was Healing the Divide by Laying the Bricks. And Healing the Divide came from the gallery because we have a show up called How We Heal, and Healing the Divide was our theme. And then we gave it to you and you came back with By Laying the Bricks. So will you just talk to me about the creative process of that title, which I adore? I just think it's absolutely perfect.
Thank you. Well, first thing is I did want to put exposed bricks somewhere in there. I will not deny I wanted to put that in the title somewhere, but I also thought that I think when we originally were collaborating and we are kind of thinking about what exactly was our mission with this event, and you gave the title of Healing the Divide, I felt like with the pieces and the artists that I selected to be a part of this, they have been laying bricks. And I think that growth and change is in the small details and the day-to-day actions that you take. And I think that looks very different for everybody, as we're going to see, later on with all the reading of the pieces. But I think that's kind of the step that comes before the healing is, identifying that process and understanding where you want to go so you can, lay the bricks to then, heal that divide, because that means you're closing the gap, in a sense where there's no longer a divide anymore because you're laying those bricks there to form that connection.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thought. I've read the magazine a few times through, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the voices of the artists themselves. So we're going to hand that over, and so and we'll save some time at the end for comments, questions, and answers. Put them in the chat. Julie will manage all of that, and we'll all get heard. So without further ado, I welcome Millie and all of the artists.
I'm gonna cry because I you guys have such a special place in my heart. Thank you so much, Paula, again for collaborating with us and giving us this platform to be able to elevate our artists. So for the sake of time, because we have 5 artists and I do want to give them all their respective due to be able to give their art, I'm gonna jump right in. So first we have Dariana, who's gonna be going. Dariana is the author of The Familiarity of Breakage. Sorry guys, I'm so excited. I'm tripping on my words. But I'm going to have Dariana go ahead and give like a little bit of background behind the piece to give us a little bit more, and then allow you to perform, and then we'll take it from there.
All right, thanks y'all. Dariana, I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm a high school English teacher, spoken word artist, fat activist, social justice warrior. And I'm really excited to share this particular piece with y'all. And it really did speak with me, the Healing the Divide title. I wrote this poem when I was literally on a train moving from one place to another. So that's a little bit of background, but I don't want to spoil it too much. So I'll just jump into the reading. The Familiarity of Breakage. In transit, body suspended in motion, a standstill. In a linear pattern, I transcend time or space. The dilapidated buildings screech past, becoming etchings of a life once inhabited, by people once inhabited. And I remember the last time my body was a house, broken, in need of repair, shards of glass sticking out of the knobs of my bones. The broken is familiar. It is the only consistency I've known. In the scars that line skin, healed over and over, but still etched in a linear pattern on the flesh. In transit, I am suspended above the haunting, lingering reminder that I cannot escape the house of my body.
All right, I'm gonna mute and I'm gonna snap for everybody. I know everybody's on mute, but just, okay, first of all, wow. That's amazing. So first thing that I want to ask from you, because I think everybody's title it's very interesting, and I wanted to ask, like, what was it about breakage that is familiar to you, and how do you identify that?
Yeah. Oh, I remember doing this in the run through, and that question is always so hard to answer. But I think for me, in the context of this poem, it's a lot about emotional and physical trauma. And I think for myself, I experienced emotional trauma when I was younger, when I was a teenager, when I was in college. And it has been something that has become so familiar that the trauma has become normalized. And I think when I wrote that on the train, I wanted to think about, you know, other people who have experienced trauma, who have left these vacant houses, right, and started new in a new place, and literally being on this kind of train and trying to figure out how this train can kind of transcend that time and transcend the past self, with the current self, but also to prepare myself for the future. I'm really interested in thinking about how to heal that inner child, and I think that that's part of what this poem is trying to explore.
Oh, that's awesome. So the next question I have for you, so that is beautiful that you were able to take an experience like that and be able to create something from it. Do you have any advice or any things that have helped you personally in terms of being able to take, you know, hurt or any types of experiences that happen and then being able to take them to create something as beautiful, you know, as this poem?
Yeah. So for me, like I've always been a person that has just channeled everything into my writing. Like I'm such a cliche, but like writing is the catharsis. Like that is where the healing for me happens. But also I think too, creating and building support systems and communities where you can share and create, kind of like what Millie and Gladys, what y'all are doing with Exposed Brick. For me, like I don't know, having friends that I can speak to, having, you know, parents that I can rely on, you know, a brother that can help me out, but even like on like another level, having a therapist to actually talk to and work through that trauma. I think for like, as a person that identifies as like a queer woman of color, like having support systems that are beyond just my family has been really important for me to kind of understand that past self and how can I heal that past self for the future.
Yeah, awesome. And then my last question is, what did Healing the Divide mean for you? I know that I had approached this project to everybody and everybody interpreted it differently. And I want to see, like, for you, what did that mean and what did that look like?
Yeah, I think in my adulthood, I'm 25, I'm about to be 26 in like 2 weeks. And while I'm still young, I still keep thinking about just that inner child and what she needed, and when she needed it, and how can I be there for her. I posted this on my own like social media page, but the post was something like, if the past self 5 years from now could see you where you are right now, like they'd be so proud. And I think that's true probably for everybody in this room. If you could see yourself 5 years in the past, they would be so proud of who you are right now and the struggle that you've had to go through to get to where you are. So I think for me, like the divide is really internal as well. Like I could talk about that for ages, but coming into my sexuality and understanding my sexuality more has been a divide for me that I've had to untangle. Being a biracial, multiracial person has been a struggle that I've had to heal. And while those themes aren't necessarily, you know, implicated in the poem I just read, I think that the past trauma that I've experienced that's in this poem is directly related to those themes. So it's hard. How can you heal that divide? And I think a lot of it is community. It's reaching out and finding support in other people.
That's beautiful.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
Isn't that
Yay!
amazing? Round of applause for Dariana. Like,
Beautiful.
amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for allowing us to hear your story and just sharing, you know, a little piece of your heart with us, because, you know, that is the essence of what Exposed Brick is. That is what we're here to do. And, thank you for allowing us to do that with you.
Yeah, thanks.
So thank you for giving us the time. So next we're going to go on to the next person, which is going to be Gladys, who's also, you heard from earlier, who's also our co-founder and our prose editor. So I'm going to allow for Gladys to go ahead and give a little bit of background about her piece and then go ahead and perform, and I'll pull that up for everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, Millie. Dariana, that was lovely. I loved hearing your insight on that as well. So my piece is called Black Liberation Politics, and it is a piece that I wrote based off of a moment that happened a couple years ago when I was in Amherst, Massachusetts. And I think Amherst is like sort of an ambiguous space. I think Amherst, Massachusetts in this case has been many places in my life. And it's a pretty descriptive piece, so I'm going to read it and then we can go into the questions. All right. I don't know how many people anticipate a bookstore in Amherst, Massachusetts to be a place of Black liberation. The college town, home of the equally prestigious University of Massachusetts and Amherst College, is a hub of white liberalness. Yet, in the language of small victories, one Saturday this summer, I found immediate liberation for my Black self in this bookstore, but that in itself was troubling. I was home for the summer and visiting with a friend who attended UMass. We were at the farmer's market, an experience I remember looking forward to, but soon realized embodied one of my biggest fears, a casual convening, read, swarming of white liberals. We were not there for 10 minutes before I figured out why I felt uncomfortable. These were the same faceless, middle-aged white folks who took up space at the college I attended during Parents' Weekend, when my own parents could not venture to Walla Walla, Washington to see me. At school, I usually took refuge in my college-sponsored housing, out of sight of these well-meaning folks, lest one of them might accidentally adopt me. At Amherst, this refuge appeared in the form of a bookstore across the street from the market. Calmly, I made my way in as to not draw attention to my ill-fitting body amidst the masses. The first thing I noticed in the store was a book at the front, titled The Black Liberation Reader. The moment was serendipitous, as if the universe knew that I was Black and perpetually on the hunt for liberation, and that I needed it in that precise moment. Desperate for anything Black, I gravitated towards it. Perhaps I did it too eagerly, because as I picked up the book, the white lady at the counter looked up to smile at me. I knew it was to ensure that I did not disrupt her precious store. I smiled back in passive-aggressive defiance, a trick taught to me by my own liberal institution. More cautious now of flipping through the book, this Black Liberation Reader, I began to wonder why it was there in a quiet bookstore in a mostly white Amherst, Massachusetts, guarded by this passive-aggressive white lady who then found some books to fondle that were suspiciously within her eye view of me. I wondered why it was on display and how many white people had come in and bought it so far. The more these thoughts came to me, the more I felt an eerie distance grow between the book and me, between the Black liberation it offered and the whiteness in which it was posited. I promptly put the book down and all but ran out of the store. I did not have time to look back and see the white woman sigh in relief. So Millie, do you have questions? I feel like
sorry, I'm snapping. I know everybody's on mute, so I'm gonna clap and snap for everybody. But wow, okay. I don't know if you feel like now you want to give a little bit more context besides just the fact that you were in a bookstore to give the audience a little bit more connection.
Yeah, so this happened in 2015. I was visiting my friend of mine who went to UMass Amherst, and we were at the farmer's market on a Saturday, and I just remember being like, oh, this is break. It's a Saturday, it's chill. I don't have any responsibilities. I love the farmer's market. But then I just immediately started kind of like having a panic attack. And I couldn't figure out why I was having a panic attack. I was like, what's wrong? This is like the safest environment that exists. And then I was like, oh, okay. There's just like a lot of like people at this farmer's market. And I think what I didn't realize in that moment until I wrote this piece was that that's how I felt at Parents' Weekend at my school. And I went to school at a small white, predominantly white school in Walla Walla, Washington, which is across the country from Lawrence, like very, very different from Lawrence. And my parents weren't able to really see me until I graduated. And there weren't a lot of students of color. There weren't a lot of low-income students. So I often felt like a novelty, like a prop, like a thing to be touched and, explored. I felt like I was there for the education of other people. And I was very wary of these instances in which there were just a lot of, especially like older white folks, because I knew that they were not my peers who I had built relationships with, right? They were often their parents who were a little bit older and a lot more, I think, removed from the relationships that I had built. And also, I was always just fearful that they were just going to be racist, right? And not even honestly like meaning to be, but a lot of my experience was a lot of older white folks trying to just like really be nice to me without knowing me, like in a way that was sort of like implied pity. And it's kind of like a feeling that built up, right? Immediately when you feel it, it doesn't feel threatening, but I think I built up this weird like resentment towards that feeling. So it was happening at this farmer's market. So then I see this bookstore and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna hide out in the bookstore for a little bit. And I run into the bookstore and the first thing that I see is this book that's literally like on display sort of at the front. And I go to it as sort of a place for refuge. And immediately I notice like this white lady at the counter who is worried about me being in the bookstore. And she's worried about me being near this book. And it was such a weird feeling. It's like she didn't want me to have access to the book. And I was just so confused at that moment. And I was like, even in this instance in which this book gives me refuge, it's like the refuge is not meant for me. Which then confirmed, my fear about being in this super safe place of being in the farmer's market. And then I had to leave the refuge at the bookstore to go back to, the farmer's market, which also felt weirdly unsafe. But I think I wrote this essay because I wanted to name that feeling of not being safe in a seemingly very safe place.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, because I know that's not easy to put into words, and that is something that some of us have experienced, and maybe others not knowing what that's like, just being able to get insight of knowing that that exists and that people are affected is definitely. Thank you so much for being brave to share that. I wanted to ask you, so what was the significance of the title? Why did you choose that? Black liberation politics?
Yeah. When I first wrote the essay, I actually thought Black liberation politics was the name of the book. The name of the book is A Black Liberation Reader, which is actually a book you can buy and it's available. But I think for me, like I studied politics in college, and I think when people think about politics, they think about elections and who's running for what and, policies and stuff. But I think in general, politics just indicates a power dynamic that exists, right? Like politics exists in so many different dynamics, like relationships and workplaces and any like I think as a teacher and like I'll give you an example. Like as a teacher, let's say I'm with a student and it's just the two of us, and something happens between the two of us, and then they come in and they ask us what happened. As a teacher, I have a certain power because I have authority and I'm older and I'm wiser, right? But then as a student, their vulnerability also gives them power because they want to protect the student first and foremost. And both of those dynamics create a politic, right? They create a power dynamic. And I think part of the reason why I kept the title was because I think Black liberation, which seems like this pure thing, like a all-encompassing, like, refuge, it shouldn't be a political place. It is shrouded in a politic, right? Like, what are the politics of writing this book? What are the politics of literature in general? Who has access to it and who is allowed to be close to it? Who is allowed to move past theory into praxis with it? I think there's so many concepts that we think that are universal and just, based in our humanity, like art and love and refuge, but there's a politics to all those things. Even when we want them and even when people have good intentions for giving them to us, there's always going to be a power dynamic that, unfortunately, in this case, keeps us away from them. So I kept the title because I wanted to indicate that even something as pure as like Black liberation, like doesn't exist inside of a politic.
Amazing. Yeah. And then the last question I wanted to ask for you was, what does Healing Divide look like for you?
Thank you. I think about it from two points of view, specifically in this instance. As a writer, I think for me, it feels like being honest. A lot of my writing is, I think, very descriptive. Like Dariana was saying, like that cliche of just like, I write everything. And I write so much that like half of it doesn't even make it to any sort of real publishing platform. And I'm trying to be better about that. So for me, it just feels about like describing the thing and having it leave my body, right? So I'm not carrying it around with me. And then the other side of that, I think from the founder side and from the part of being a publisher and being an editor, I think healing the divide means that even specifically in this moment, in this event, I think there are folks that want to reach out, like Paula is a good example of that, like folks that want to help and folks that want to get involved and get to know us. And, you know, it helps to have a platform, right? It helps for us to be ready and have a magazine, you know, like how would we reach this moment and get to know each other in this way if it wasn't for the magazine, if we weren't ready, if we didn't believe in ourselves? So I think on the more technical side of it, I think part of healing the divide is, you know, believing in yourself and believing that you're worthy of that platform and creating it so that you can meet the folks who actually do want to help. So yeah, that's what it means to me.
Yeah, claps, big ups, big ups. Thank you so much.
That was really, really good. I can't wait to talk more to you, Gladys. That was lovely.
Yeah, so thank you again, you know, for being vulnerable and sharing a piece of your heart, because I know that meant a lot and I definitely felt that. So thanks, Gladys. We're gonna go on to our next artist, Ryko. So we're gonna have Ryko go ahead and give a little bit of background behind the piece, and then you can go ahead and get into your performance, and I'll pull that up for everybody to follow along.
Hi, my name is Ryko. I'm a student at Noble Greeno. I do a lot of like DEI work, and I'm very much an activist like at my school. And I wrote this piece in my poetry club that was led by Miss G at the time, when I was, I think it was like a sophomore. And during that time, a lot of the Black students in my school were really trying to advocate for change. And we always had a lot of like race talks, but a lot of frustration built up with the way that a lot of white students were reacting to, you know, our sort of, I guess, speeches almost. Um, and, you know, whenever we let out like our frustration with certain things, or pointed out stuff that was wrong, they always had a reaction that just felt really like frustrating. For a lot of us, it felt like we were really just like talking to a wall for a good portion of the time. And that was sort of like the main inspiration for this piece. And I will now get into it. Uncomfortable. I know what I say is powerful when I see people give their friends the side eye when I'm the only Black person in my English class. I know my truth is uncomfortable. When I talk about my past, I see you shift in your seat, eyes averted, secondhand embarrassment making you blush. I understand. It feels strange. For a stranger to trigger old memories you don't want to be nostalgic about. Words you tried to forget to remember, problems you didn't want to be a part of. It's why some students stopped at her death, knowing unrelenting depression is prevalent in this place. It's why my truth almost got my poetry club shut down. It almost made me shut down as well. Thank you.
Thank you. That's awesome. I wanted to ask you, so why did you choose uncomfortable to be your title? I know uncomfortable has a lot of different definitions and experiences for everybody. And why did you choose to make that like your title, and kind of what's your experiences with feeling uncomfortable and identifying that?
So first things first, a reason why this piece was so short was it was actually for a challenge that we had done in the club. It was a 5-minute challenge. And in that moment, when I chose the words, you know, uncomfortable, um, I was thinking a lot about like the reaction that a lot of white students had to whatever we were saying. Specifically, you know, at our school, we do a lot of assemblies. And that's where we're able to sort of voice our opinions. And whenever Black students got up and talked about something that had to do with race, you could always sort of feel the room sort of, you know, just get really like awkward. You could see like white students next to you kind of look at their friends, start texting in their group chats. It's just a very apparent thing that, you know, a lot of the white students were just like super, you know, actually like uncomfortable. Like they felt very awkward, or they felt um, indifferent, or they were annoyed that like we are talking about it again. And it was just really frustrating because it's like we're talking about it again because you're not listening to us. And there was uncomfortability in that sense as well. A lot of Black students were uncomfortable with the way things were, and uncomfortable with the way that the administration worked. Um, and it seems to be like a prevalent feeling that has, it still like goes on like into my junior year. Recently we've had so many changes, but again, it's only when like we start to bring up this topic of uncomfortability that things actually seem to move a certain way. So yeah, that's why I chose that title.
Yeah, thank you. And what has been helpful for you to be able to channel that feeling that is uncomfortable and kind of can be hard to understand and wrestle with, as not many people around you could be able to relate to that? How are you able to turn that into art?
I think for me, I've honestly always sort of experienced that because of like other people. I moved to Massachusetts when I was around 8 years old. And it was my first time going to such a predominantly white school. And it was in a pretty like low income community. And so that feeling of being uncomfortable and like I don't belong has been something that has always been with me for a very long time. And I guess at this point, it's just become very easy for me to talk about it just because, I've always sort of felt that way, or like at least like in this place.
Yeah, amazing. And lastly, I want to ask, what does healing the divide mean to you?
So from a person who works a lot with the DEI, and from, sort of like student activist point, healing the divide to me means empathy, understanding, accountability, and responsibility, specifically within systems and institutions. To me, it really means being able to bond with your students, or to really sort of what Gladys was talking about, the sort of like power struggle that goes on, to be able to use that power struggle in a way that's actually sort of conducive and actually benefits and helps institution, instead of, you know, bringing a bigger divide. That's what healing the divide means to me.
I keep forgetting I'm snapping and clapping for everybody, because that was, yeah,
That's beautiful.
that was beautiful. Thank you so much,
have
Mariko,
questions as
for
well.
sharing with us. I know that, I know I'm gonna take a moment now just to pause. I know we are talking about some like difficult things. I know we're talking about some very real, raw emotions, and I know that we are giving light to some experiences. And so, just thank you for, all of our artists. I'm not done. I'm sorry. I get so sentimental because like this is my baby, and it's so wonderful to see, people being in an atmosphere like this, to be able to have the comfortability to be able to have these conversations is really amazing. And I just want to thank you for sharing a piece of your heart, Mariko. So we're gonna go on to our next artist, which is Roberta. So Roberta, Roberta's gonna go ahead and give us a little bit of background on her piece, which is a melancholia. And then I'm just gonna let you go in and read
All
your.
right. Thank you so much. You guys hear me? I'm not used to Zoom, so I don't know how this works. So I just want to say thank you to everybody sharing your stories. It's really beautiful and an honor to share, being part of that publication of the magazine, because we're on there together. A little backstory. So last year, 2020, yeah, I had released a poetry book, which is called Melancholica. Um, and one of the last stories is the story that I'll be reading. And so it just kind of ties it all together. So if you have this book, I think a few of you might have it. So I'll just jump into it. Let's see here. Actually, I'm gonna take this off. No, sorry. Where'd it go? Melancholica is a childhood home. Melancholica is a childhood home that you drive by once in a while, and every time you glance over, it has taken a new shape. At times, it looks like any other abandoned house on the block. Other times, it substitutes for a clock that tells me how time has moved through that space. I would drive by and ritually look over to my childhood home as if there were a portal that I tethered to it, a window to my past life. a dedicated liminal bubble that would pop as soon as I turned back to face the road. For a while, it was just the house and I having the same conversations, moving through the same feelings that I experienced in and around it, habitually checking my childhood scars like checking the watch on my wrist. How much healing has been done? Or am I just picking at my scabs to perform for it? See how much I still love you, home? Until one day I drive by the street, and before I can begin my ritual, I see that the house is no longer there to continue the conversation with me. Nothing but an empty lot, a gaping hole that swallowed my childhood home without my permission. It never occurred to me that it would cease to exist someday. What else could take the place of the home I grew up in? What dared to? What had any right? Melancholia is driving by your childhood home enough times to notice the slow decay of its exterior, the warping of the foreclosure sign through the seasons. Melancholica is driving by your childhood home and it no longer has the shape of a home. It has no shape at all. It vanished in the night before I could imbue it with any more meaning. Melancholica is driving by the street that your childhood home once resided on, and you notice that the liquor store next door bought your childhood home and is extending itself onto its sacred lot. The same liquor store Dad would sneak off to, or at least he thought he was sneaking off to. Although I don't think he realized how much his anxiety echoed throughout our home. I don't think he realized how quiet it became when he took his echoes with him to the same liquor store in exchange for beer, or when he returned and the alcohol in his breath was the first to set foot in the door. Melancholica is the blue house that had the green kitchen tiles, the bright green ones we all thought were ugly, that Dad loved so much he even put them on the walls. Melancholica is realizing, while you look back at photographs, that maybe Dad was just homesick for Brazil and its luscious greens. His artistic control extended all the way up our stairway, where the walls were blue and red, and he was generous with the glitter he sprinkled onto the paint. We thought that was really ugly too. Until one evening, as I climbed the stairs, a passing car's headlights slipped in through the windows and rippled up the glittering walls. Or that one time I swear I saw an angel's glowing tunic entering a room while we spoke about God in the kitchen. I wonder if the angel came down to say it agreed that the green tiles were a distasteful choice, but decided not to. These are the memories we would reminisce about whenever I drove by the street I once lived on, that my home once lived on. Melancholica is looking back on a home where the cloak of your childhood became more opaque, where you were growing up and didn't even know it. I know that growing older is just romanticizing the past, but I don't want to be turned into a pillar of salt for looking back, for performing rituals that no longer serve me, for places that no longer have space for me. Now, when I drive by a mega liquor store in lieu of my childhood home, I cannot perform my rituals. It is gone. The liquor store took, sorry, the cat. The liquor store took so much from my family and still it took more. I had to hold on to my nostalgia as I drive past Morton Street because there's no home for it anymore. The end.
Wow.
Thank you.
A moment. Can we all have a moment? Because I know that was a lot.
Sorry, it's a lot.
It was a lot, and that's why thank you for sharing first and foremost, because I know there's a lot of different themes and underlying feelings that go beyond the surface levels. But I guess we'll start there and talk about why did you choose, the title and kind of the significance that that has, because I know that that's tied in this poem or this piece. It's not a poem. This piece is tied to a house and kind of like the significance of that.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, the poetry book, which is called Melancholica, which kind of ties in the whole thing. In the title, I put Mel. I don't know if you could see it, but in parentheses, because in Portuguese, mel means honey. And I had come up with this concept where melancholica to me sounds like honey cramps, which is something, which is kind of like nostalgia, it's sweet and yet it kind of gives you some cramps. So that's why I went with the title, because it's nostalgic, driving by an old childhood home, one of my childhood homes. And, it's kind of like a bittersweet feeling to experience that, and then for it to be gone and the whole process of then the liquor store extending itself, so just it all being tied together is kind of bittersweet. I don't know if that answered the question, but
Oh, sorry I was muted.
I was like, what happened?
No, I was gonna say, so So how did you turn that feeling into art? Because as we've been hearing tonight, we've been able to take a lot of different feelings and experiences, and rather just leaving them as just those of feelings and experiences, that we collectively have been able to create art with that. And how did you do that, and what has been helpful for you during that process?
Um, yeah, so like you mentioned, we used to do writing club at the cafe on Sundays, and most of this book was written on Sundays, just, sitting down and writing whatever came to mind. And that story came to mind just because this is a house in Lawrence that I would just drive by consistently, and having that conversation with the house, and then for, that process to happen. Um, so it just came out. I just started writing and didn't realize how emotional it was for me at the time. It's just a house. You're just driving by and looking at this house, but I don't know, it just became very emotional, especially, factoring in like certain themes regarding my family and stuff. So the funny thing is, when you had asked me to read this story, I hadn't read it in so long because, like I said, I wrote it last year, and I had read it and whatever, read through it and was like, okay, I'll read that. And then I noticed that I felt upset, but I couldn't really put a finger on it. I was just like, oh, I'm suddenly all upset. But it wasn't suddenly. It was, I had read the story and it was just settling into my body. And I could feel it just like moving around my chest and my stomach. And I was like, oh, I'm just upset out of nowhere. But it wasn't out of nowhere. It was because of the story. And that really showed me that I was still processing some of that feeling. But at the same time, rereading, and since you asked me to read it, obviously rereading it over and over again just to get more used to it, it kind of feels like it's distant, like this, like the house. It's kind of, it shows that I've healed from that. Writing it helped me move on from that. So yeah, so I don't know if I started rambling, but
Yeah,
um,
no,
that helped me process those emotions.
yeah. And what does healing the divide mean for you?
Hmm. Um, Healing the divide. I think basically what I was saying, I guess, just writing that story and it being really emotional, and then rereading it after a year, it's still being emotional, but still feeling like, okay, I've moved past this, like I've healed from this. So I feel like, it feels almost like a little, what's the word? Um, I don't know, but like from the past, it feels so distant. It's like, oh, I don't know if I relate to it as much, rereading it so many times. It's like, oh, I would change a few things. But that tells me that that I've healed enough to be able to look, step back and say, okay, I understand where I was in that point, like a year ago. And so the divide is from last year to now is like healing the divide, I guess, literally, just processing those emotions.
Yeah, well, snap and
Thanks.
claps. I know
Thank you, thank you.
that was a really well put, nicely said. Yeah, thank you for sharing a piece of your heart as well, Roberta.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're gonna go on to our last artist as we're gonna round it out before we have a little bit of time. I believe Paula said for questions before we end. So we'll jump into Yaneris. And then I'm going to allow Yaneris to give a little bit of background on the piece, and then I will pull it up for everybody to be able to follow along as they perform.
Hi, everyone. I hope you all can hear me. My name is Yaneris Collado, or Janeris Collado. I wrote this piece as a reflection to my experience being a Lawrence, Mass resident, but also just like being in middle school in Lawrence and being in high school and just growing up. I say Jan from the block, but it's multiple blocks. I have family all over Lawrence, from Bailey Street to the Beacons to Essex Projects to Prospect Hill to all of it. So it was interesting writing this piece because it was a lot of different synopsis and just spots of memories and in my mind. And here it is. Can I read it? Millie, or yeah. All right, and I'm gonna read it actually straight from straight from the magazine. So shout out to y'all, because this is a beautiful issue, and I'm just so excited that just, you know, that I'm a part of this. So this is cool. We learned our greatest lessons in corner store bodegas, where boys followed you in real life and watched you buy your favorite chips with a side of soda and 25 cents worth of Jolly Rancher. That's 25 Jolly Ranchers, y'all. Asking, why'd you buy all that? To which I replied, this only cost me $2, bro. Now move out of my way. We burned our youngest calories in the playground and tanned our darkest there too. Melanin burning, no sunblock to protect us from this block, nothing to protect us really. We had each other though. The games we played surpassed quinceañeras and 18 birthdays, were even family expecting and accepting you under the influence for the culture. Para arriba, para abajo, para el centro y para dentro. To the boy that called me his girl on MySpace on some catfish type. Yeah, I got a man. Leave me alone. I was always single. I was a hard to get type shorty, and ain't nobody wanted her after a while. She learned to love herself, learned to lean forward in the mirror and kiss herself with all her might, even on days she did not want to. I remember when the stoop was our sanctuary, when laughter was the only medicine that cured our broken hearts from domestic bullshit. We were little warriors fighting for chicken grease and 50-cent potato chips. Those were the big ones, the ones you had to share with the person next to you, or else you'll look like a lambona, and there are no lambonas allowed. It was here in this very block where I learned to walk my first steps, and where I learned to dance. Learned how to back it up by older cousins and tias that wanted to make a mean woman out of me. It was here where I cried my first heartbreak and healed all that bullshit sorrow out the dust, where cockroaches colonized and Corona's bottles were bought by the double dozens. We sang our saddest songs here, spit our strongest poems too. We still blessed right here. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna claps and snaps. Like man. Also, we do have an interview. If you buy the issue, we do have an interview in the back with Daenerys. That goes a little bit further if you want to know more about their story and a little bit of their process. But first of all, wow. Okay, right. I feel like you took us on a journey throughout that piece, and I want to ask you, like, what did that feel like, you know, going back and just reflecting on how far you've come and all the different pieces that have really tied together to make you, you know, who you are today and who you're also continuing to grow into.
So like I was reading this and I was like, man, I really wish that there was like some type of connection between like teleporting and poetry, because I was like out here speaking my heart out, but then also like teleporting into all these parts of my life. So I mean, it felt accurate actually. I, you know, it goes from like playing and burning our youngest calories in the background to then going into like 15 and 18 birthdays. I feel like that is a huge like step in my life. Like 15 and 18, that was like my introduction to adulthood. So we out here talking about MySpace and like 2002, 2003 vibes, 2006 vibes, AIM messaging, you know, to kind of like growing into this woman who's 18 and like, okay, my parents are allowing me to take a shot with them. I'm 18 years old, you know, so it felt really cool to say everything out loud. Yeah, and the process itself was not what I envisioned or not what I sat down and dreamt about. but I love to reminisce on it. It's a great memory. So yeah.
Yeah, that's wow. Okay, so how have you been able to kind of take those experiences and be able to write and reflect them? You know, that is something that's pretty amazing about writing, is you are able to look back and kind of see how far you've come. And what about like the process of creating and you being able to make that art has been helpful for you in this process?
So like writing poetry or writing in general, because sometimes I just write words and then I'm like, okay, I guess this is a poem. It's just a list of like a whole bunch of words. um, but writing poetry or writing even this piece was a really cool experience. It's always a cool experience. Sometimes it's a frustrating experience. This piece has been edited like so many times. So I want to say I wrote this towards the end of my college career. Just I was reflecting on like, I'm graduating from college. Where do I come from? Who am I? You know, and being able to put it on paper and say it out loud, it again, all these different voices and all this like language, like Lawrence, I called it Lawrence English dialect, like using lambona and like all these other words that I used, even like the whole taking a shot with your community, like that's all a part of the culture. And I wanted to make sure, even though I was writing this specifically, what is my target goal with this piece? So that was definitely a goal, was to write about Lawrence and to embrace myself about Lawrence. And the process was it was emotional a little bit. It was cool. It was cool. I was like, yeah, you know, I'm writing about young Yang Yan out here. You know, she was crazy or whatever. But then when it comes to me, like really going into deep about healing myself, it was a little emotional because I really had to see like, what are you really healing from, or what, why can't you see yourself in the mirror? Why do you have to write these words down? So writing that down and saying it out loud kind of like, you know, cleanses the heart a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So what does healing the divide mean to you?
Healing the divide, I want to say it's understanding why we are divided in the first place and embracing our common ground, whatever that means. And sometimes I feel like, because sometimes you might see that and it's like, well, but also I don't have any tolerance for any of this inequity going on in the world. It's also just understanding what is your tolerance and can that other side understand and respect that. And then what happens when that doesn't happen, when that isn't reciprocated? Is there some type of closure that you have to have with yourself about this divide? Because sometimes I feel like we want to heal this divide, and I want it so bad, like so radically bad. But then there are days when, you know, it's all up in our face, this divide, this violent divide. So it's like, what can I do to heal myself, to make sure that I'm prepared for my community when it's about that communal work, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Snaps and claps, everybody. Daenerys is our last artist, so I just want to give like a super big applause just for everybody who shared, for all our artists that worked with us, for all of you who had taken the time out to listen to their powerful stories, listen to their vulnerable emotions, and thank you for sharing a piece of your heart, Daenerys, because you know that means a lot. So with that being said, I know that Paula wanted to go into some questions, so I'm going to let you kind of take from here as we try to dish it out in the time that we have.
I just want to say that it's been such an emotional and beautiful. I feel honored to have been here tonight, honestly, and to hear your voices has been a beautiful experience. And I just want to, in our, you know, I don't want to run over too long, but just if anyone would like to say something to our poets and performers, just unmute yourself and say what you want to say to them. It's been really a beautiful experience for me, and I took notes, and I, you know, The accountability piece is really powerful. The body as home piece was really, really powerful to me. The growing up without realizing it piece. I mean, just there's a lot of wisdom in all of your beautiful works tonight. So if anyone would like to just say hello, or I love you, or thank you, please do. Yes, Deborah Sable wants to know how to purchase a magazine. It's and Julie can put that their website back in the chat. So it's
Yep, you can purchase it through our website.
yes. Yep. Would anyone else before we go like to just say a word or two? I think you've all got great careers in front of you, and I'm really, really looking forward to hearing more from you. It just opened my heart and my mind and my soul. And I just thank you very much. And thank you all for being here tonight. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. I feel very moved. That's been wonderful.
Yeah, it really has.
Yeah, I feel honored to be able to listen and appreciate that. Hear the different voices and the perspectives.
Yeah,
It's great.
thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you very much.
Well, enjoy your evenings. You did a beautiful job. Take a big sigh because you did beautiful. Millie, I loved the way that you conducted it all. It was so helpful to hear the artists speak at first and then be able to read their words, and then the questions were awesome. So you did a beautiful job. Thank you. And thanks everybody for coming. Until next time, have a great weekend.
And then the claps. Thank you so much, everybody. Check out our website. We also have an artist spotlight series on our IG. If this is something that you're interested with, some of our artists that are already out there. If you want to learn more about us, check us out on Facebook and Instagram as well. And we hope to see everybody here again in the near future, whether that's
We'll do one for this when the second issue comes out, and we want Brick Lit to be in the literary festival next year. So we'll figure out a way of getting a poll done for that. So yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you and mil gracias.
Yes.